Okay, hi everybody, and welcome to, what's it going to be? It's going to be an investigation of a treatise on cosmic fire, that great book that was sort of the seminal book for many other books that he elaborated the themes within. So out of that came the esoteric psychology, and out of that came a treatise on white magic and many things he mentioned in kind of a abbreviated manner. He says it's a book, all 1,200 and something pages of it, that is for the initiate consciousness, you know. In other words, the only people who will really understand it will be initiates of the third degree, and even they will only understand some things. And you could say that about the rays and the initiations, the 14 rules for group initiation. You could say that too, you could. But we will be brave, and we will make an attempt right now in kind of a weekly manner until, you know, I have to start traveling and all that for the United States and for the conference, basically. You know, when Tui and I do that, that is so pressed that there's just no way to carry on the usual schedule. So the only thing you can do is then come to the conference, you see. That's how it's set up. Well, a treatise on cosmic fire. I think, you know, I taught a class on this, and actually I taught several classes on this in Denmark and in California, and another one in California, several times. And it went on for 5 years, and it could have gone on for the rest of the century, basically. So will we go on for 5 years, or will we stop after 5 programs? It remains to be seen. But I do hope that somehow we latch on to the great encompassing themes. We're going to begin with the introduction, really, and then see how far we go. I'll try not to make it overbearing. Now, why am I doing this? Well, I just, you know, due to the promptings of one of the longtime students of this material and what she wrote about the local cosmos, I began to see the response, and I began to see, goodness, this is something that people may really need. And it's also my belief, and I've said it many times, that there are 2 ways to approach the ageless wisdom available to us, and DK has given us the method of the soul and the method of the Antikarana monad, triad. Now, this book is not written on the second ray. It's written particularly on the third ray and the first ray, and I think we'll see that. But of course, you can't really avoid the second ray because it is the most profound ray in our solar system. It's at this time, the personality ray, and it's always the soul ray of our solar logos. And before you know it, his kind of fourth ray monad, which I think it is fourth ray monad, will be evolving on the plane of Adi, the highest plane in the Sea of Fire, into a second ray monad. So he's really, you know, 222, a great heart center. And all of us, whatever other rays we have, we are units in a huge heart center, which is going to, in a way, prove its heart during this major solar system, the second major solar system, and the fifth solar system through which our particular solar logos has been manifesting as a solar logos. It's a 2 and a 5. The minute you get 2 and 5 together, you've got Venus, you've got Sirius. Those are, you've got the solar angels. those are major sources that resonate to the numbers 2, the second ray, and the fifth ray. The fifth ray, we know, is the most luminous of all the ray lords, and, you know, from the Earth's point of view, Venus is pretty bright. Its soul ray is the fifth ray. And the second ray is the most luminous of all soul types among humanity. So we're dealing a lot with 2 and 5 in this book, in addition to the third ray and the first ray. And really, you know, the information given, you're going to find all the rays. And the way I'm going to approach it is to use the Alice Bailey extracts that I've been laboring on for many years, you know, extracting different quotations that may be helpful. And you could get a hold of that for yourself. You can download it. BL, Allison, she knows where to download it because she put it in a place that's accessible to everybody. So it's just a really big file with all of these references and compilations listed alphabetically. So I would really recommend that every one of you have that. And, you know, Joe, if you'd be so kind as to ask BL where it is. I keep on...
Yes, we'll do that, and we'll get the link to everyone.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And then you can have that because there may be things you want to look up. And I was doing a lot of work. I had a Piscean period, I guess you might say, which was kind of a withdrawal. And Uranus was in Pisces, and I knew once Uranus got into Aries, it was going to be full steam ahead for me. So while it was in Pisces, I gathered a lot of material that could be used for the new cycle. And this new cycle, it was a plunge into cosmic fire. So now what I want to say is that there's 2 curricula going on here. And some of you who are a member of Identify as Being in the Yahoo groups, which I finally figured out how to, I had a student's name associated with that email, but now it's just Identify as Being at yahoogroups.com. That is the curriculum of being. And when you're looking at a curriculum of being, you're looking for utter simplicity. You're looking for something that's so simple, finally, that it has no parts at all. You're looking for utter homogeneity. You're looking for the sameness of isness, the sameness of isness. Think about that for a minute. The sameness of isness. Whatever is very different, okay, a lot of differences, but we're looking for the sameness of isness. That's in the curriculum of being. Well, this is not the curriculum of being. Obviously, I'm so taken by the subject that I'll be mentioning it, but this is the curriculum of meticulous entirety. Meticulous entirety. And you're familiar with that idea, I know, and it's particularly found, I've got a lot of files open here, don't I? I'm going to go to Esoteric Psychology, Volume 2, and give you a little idea. You probably have it. Meticulous. Well, if there's only one meticulous, there's only one meticulous entirety. Now, this is Buddhic, and this is what DK has done for us. Now, he said the fourth ray mind is a very important mind ray in my work. It's not any kind of just artistic or dreamy or imagistic mind. It's the mind of pure reason. It can be. So let's look at what inclusive reason can mean on the Buddhic plane, especially on the fourth sublevel of the Buddhic plane, because that's what we want to call in. And I think this is just a beautiful way of describing it. It's an advanced meditation when you start meditating on inclusive reason with its meticulous entirety. Inclusive reason, which is the theme for the, note this, initiatory meditation of the second ray disciple. It's not for beginners, okay? But don't worry about it, we're all beginners. Okay, the initiatory meditation of the second ray disciple produces that inherent divine capacity which enables the detail of the sensed whole to be grasped in meticulous entirety. The detail of the sensed whole to be grasped in meticulous entirety. There's three major type of second ray types or souls. One is austere and wise like the Buddha. Another's filled with love like the Christ. And then there's the decay type, who's the occultist, and he understands things in meticulous entirety. This wide yet detailed scope or universal recognition is extremely difficult for me to explain or for you to understand. How often we're going to be told that, okay. The second ray has been called the ray of detailed knowledge. And where this, now note that, the ray of detailed knowledge, especially on the third aspect of the second ray, which Master Decay, with probably one of his monadic rays being the third, he represents that. The Christ, on the other hand, is a solid 2-2. The second ray has been called the ray of detailed knowledge, and where this term has been employed, the beginner, that's all of us, has necessarily laid the emphasis upon the word detail. It might rather be called the ray of detailed unity, or the ray of the divine pattern, or of beauty in relationship. It involves on the part of the disciple a very high point of synthetic comprehension. So that's a very, beautiful paragraph explaining the way that we're going to try to study with meticulous entirety so that we can achieve a detailed unity, not just detail, but detailed unity, and see the divine pattern or archetype, and see the beauty in relationship that it represents, and achieve this synthetic comprehension so desired by the occultist, the true spiritual occultist. That's how we'll approach, okay? And everything is fair game, because now when we look at this is the curriculum of relativity. It's not the curriculum of isness or beiness. That's different. This is the curriculum of relativity. And in order to have the great science of relations, you've got to have something to relate. And basically what it means is that you have to have division. You have to have parts. You have to have pieces. You have to have a jigsaw. You have to have many, many different, apparently different things to relate in the right way, the archetypal way, as the particular logos of your system conceives it to be. So you can't, you're at cross purposes if you try to study absolute simplicity along with meticulous entirety, but we're going to do that anyway, okay? And we'll understand the two curricula that we are in a way enjoined to grasp. DK teaches us the antikarana into the triad. It leads to spiritual will. It leads to the monad, the perceiver of oneness. Okay, but not the curriculum of relativity. There, all the complexity of the planet, the solar system, the local cosmos system, and on and on and on, all the complexity of our universe is fair game if we want to understand with meticulous entirety. So I hope I've explained why there are two things running here. One of them, the curriculum of being, or the curriculum of isness, or, just use whatever words. It's based upon infuception and the perception of that which unifies everything, and it has to be active and real. And the other is a much more mental process, the curriculum of relativity, where we try to understand how everything interacts with everything else. Okay, I hope I'm clear on that point. I just want to, I won't always be able to welcome you because, the numbers are a little larger here, but okay. But hi and welcome, Andrea, Anne, Anna, Anne-Marie, Annette, and Antonella, and Antoinette, and Brennan, and Karsten, and Catherine, Francois, Helen, Hideko, Joe Garceau. We have our Joe Waltz, who helps us with everything else. Jocelyn, Jo Hee Lee from South Korea. Karen, Catherine, Carrie, Leah, Loretta, Lorraine, Mariana, Mariut, Martha, Maribel, Nicholas, NN, Nyenke, Risto, Raz, Stephen, and Suzanne, Tanya, Tara, Tia, Vera, Yvonne, hi Yvonne, long time no see, Zenaidi, and Anne Veronica, and over here on staff, Joe and Michael are backing us up, and boy, I've discovered I need it, otherwise some things might not get recorded at all. Yeah, now, I'll tell you what, Yvonne, maybe if it's a technical question, just write it, but if it's a substantive question about what we're talking about, well, okay, why not? Why not? Why not? I usually, go on like this for a while, then open the floor, but why not? Yvonne, what's on your mind? And you're self-muted, so you have to unmute yourself in order to be able to speak. Can you do that? Otherwise, someone will give you some advice about how to do that, and then when we open up the floor, then you can speak, and everyone can speak or write or whatever. Look, there are 1,243, is it? Or is it 94? I don't know, pages in this book. So what should we do? Hang on to the end of the century or what? Anyway, we'll try up to the year 2025 to keep going with the synthesis of the Tibetan's work. Now, of course, that's preposterous. We cannot synthesize the Tibetan's work. We can't. He can, But what we can do is get a more and more embracing picture of what's going on. Now, there is, I've got a lot of things open here, so I hope it doesn't stall on me, but we started at this particular time. And this is the chart, and you notice there's a big, juicy, six-pointed star in the middle of everything. That's the six-pointed star of the monad. And, Akbar, who was Solomon, who was Maurya, or is Maurya, and was Solomon, and King Akbar, and Emperor Akbar, really. I wonder if he was Charlemagne sometime, I don't know, but he had that six-pointed star emblazoned on his buildings in Adyar. Was it Adyar, or was it Agra? Agra, I think that's it, Agra. That was sort of his symbol, the six-pointed star. It's not just isolated and meaning, Judaism and Israel and all that. It's much bigger than that. It's the star of the monad. It's the number 6. It's ruled by Virgo. And our star shows that. Now, I'm not going to get into a really big analysis here, but Mars and the Sun are conjunct, and they're in Virgo, so a lot of discrimination will be required of us as we do this. A boy with a censer serves near the priest. We are obviously in the position of that devotee who is aspiring towards what Master DK is revealing here. And this kind of a girls' basketball team, there's a lot of aspiration there and a lot of energy. So Mars and the Sun together, it's very discriminating, and it digs into the detail. I waited until a certain symbol came onto the ascendant. Now remember what we're saying about Cancer, which is the ascendant here. We say of Cancer that the wholeness is seen as one. The whole is seen as one. Okay. Now, that wholeness is something that we have to work towards. And a book like Cosmic Fire will certainly help us. And the symbol is, and I wonder if any of us is anything but this, a large diamond, not completely cut. That always appeals to me because it's so realistic. We're undergoing pressure under Vulcan and refinement, and the final precision, the final cut is not there, but we are still a large diamond, and we have a lot of potential, but we have to work on it, and that's what this is all about. Of course, Neptune is still in Pisces, and the Mars-Neptune thing, you know, we fight against glamour. Mars and Neptune together is a lot of that, and we have to handle the solar plexus energies, but boy, there's a lot of discipline here, because if you go over here, you see Saturn right there in the 7th house, and it's discipline, you know, and it's in the Taurus decade, and it says an ancient bas-relief carved in granite. So we're dealing with the great fundamentals that always last, and you're also meeting your own dweller on the threshold here at the 7th house cusp. You know, basically, Saturn is the strongest in the 7th house, and it's in its own sign. So a lot of people will consider this, oh boy, this is a burden. Once you know, how you begin Cosmic Fire is you don't begin with that nice, juicy stuff about the soul. You begin with the elemental world and the lower fires and all of that. So, you know, that's a shorter section, thank God, I think, but it's more difficult to get through. The interesting thing is here, we've got kind of a grand trine in Earth, don't we? The moon is in Taurus, the sun is in Virgo with Mars, and Saturn is in Capricorn, and they're all really within trine relationship of each other. Mars, moon, and Saturn, and the sun by translation of light. So they're all, so it's practical, you know. I mean, compared with identify as being, maybe we might consider anything to be practical. But these are the nuggets of the ageless wisdom. And this book is a continuation of the secret doctrine, the psychological key to the secret doctrine. There's a lot of keys to the ageless wisdom. And, you know, you'll find your own particular key, whether it's, you know, mathematical or scientific or, you know, this one is psychological, the psychological key to the secret doctrine. And all the different ray and astrological energies make their appearance, and the quality of things is very important. Now, what's really interesting is when you get into identify as being, quality is not what we're looking for. I know it seems strange. Here in the science of relations, we're looking for quality. In this, what did I call it just a few minutes ago? Well, it'll come back to me. It is the study of relationships and all of their intricacy. That's what we're doing. But in the identify as being, we're not looking for quality. We're looking for isness. We're looking for beingness. We're looking for identicality is what we're looking for. In the study of cosmic fire, he takes everything apart and discriminates and differentiates. And although he hints at it, he does always give you a nice hint about identicality and being. That's not what he's doing particularly. He's really taking the world apart and putting it back together. So, this is and basically, with all these planets, Venus and Mercury, which is wonderful for Buddhi and Manas. Mercury here represents Buddhi, Venus represents Manas, and the frontier for people like ourselves is Buddhi, Manas. So we've got lots going on in the fifth house, and the fifth house is the house of selfhood and its expression. Now, there's all different kinds of selves, and a lot of people just think they are the personality, but not for students of cosmic fire. They know they are something higher than that, and there will be the attempt to link together the triad and the soul via the Antakarana, and it's all showing up in the fifth house. And we will learn to express ourselves as a higher being if we also study, identify as being along with it. Some people get so caught in the details, that's all they can think about. They just think about this and that and, intricate relations, very interesting. I've been there, I'm doing that too. But it's not the experience of the energies. Now, in addition to all the detail that's in cosmic fire and all the rest of it, meticulous entirety, there is the experience of that something behind every form. And that's what we're looking for in identify as being. So I'm just telling you that I consider both of these approaches as very, very important. The detailed approach and the unitive oneness approach. I consider both very important. Okay, well, I'm not going to analyze this chart to the nth degree. It's really interesting to me that it's got a lot of earth in it. And you might think, and it's got a mystic triangle in here as well, a mystic quadrangle, as well as the six-pointed star. It can be quite a nicely integrated chart one fine day, because Cancer is the sign of integration, and it can bring a disparate wholeness together into a real wholeness. So the parts and pieces all get integrated. But it's going to require discipline if you really want to get into it. This is no easy book. And it's the seed book of so much else that he wrote that maybe is easier to understand. But when there's something out there that helps elaborate on something that we're just reading, then we'll go for that and we'll bring it in, We're interested in synthesis here, and that Neptune and Pisces can help us. Neptune will go into Aries, sometime I think in 2024 or early 25. Nicholas, you might know. It goes into Aries, and then in a way it's like the return of the Christ, but it won't be exactly at that time. It'll be the real beginning of that type of work. In other words, the real plans will be laid for the externalization, which has to precede the reappearance of the Christ, and we've got about 100 years. Okay, well, I'm tempted, as all people interested in astrology are, to just keep going with this, but I'm not going to. We got to watch out for our kind of T-squares here and other things like that. We've got quite a exaggerated T-square going between Jupiter and Mars and Neptune, but thank goodness we're Virgo here, And Saturn is the disciplinarian, so we won't get entirely lost in wild speculation. All right, anyway, this is available, and if any of our astrologers want to write on this, their own ideas about it, then okay, that's most welcome. Now, let me, before we go on to the next thing, which is the introduction to the book, I think we had a couple of things going. We had some statements, and then we had Yvonne with her hand up again, so we'll see whether we can get a hold of you, Yvonne, this time. And Carsten from Denmark, what about the colors, PowerPoints, and slides of the evolution of the solar logos? It's that, well, that's to you, right? And the answer here is a pretty good one. She's developing these, but I have a feeling that she likes to do things perfectly, but I have a feeling that she will relent, and because after all, they do come from DK. And Tuya and I sat down on this, and she was most meticulous about it. She's Capricorn, it had to be done right. And so when she finally decides it's been done right enough, then everybody can have those to study. Now, Mariana, why can't I see Michael when he talks? Well, it's oftentimes because Michael has forgotten to press a button. But I guess it looks like... right. Okay, I believe me, I'm here. Well, I don't know. I have a friend who said I seem to be here, and well, now that's relativity for you, isn't it? Okay, Roz, is this a chapter from passage from TCF? No, Esoteric Psychology. Good, thank you for answering that on the side, team. And okay, and there's something about Dropbox. So I'm not going to answer the technical questions so much. I'm going to leave that to Joe and BL, because I might lead you astray, and that's the one thing I don't want to do. So you'll figure that out with the help of Michael and Joe and anybody else they have to call upon. Okay, so those are a couple of questions that got asked at first, and now let's see, Yvonne, you are still self-muted. So you've pressed your hand, which is what people do when they want to speak, but you're self-muted, and you need to unmute yourself if you want to speak. Of course, maybe you just pressed your hand. When I see a hand go up, instead of a question mark, it means that the person wants to speak out loud rather than write something. So if that's your motive, okay, and if it's not, then be careful about pressing the hand. Okay. Now, let's go on. Well, okay. Let me just, are there any particular questions about what I've talked about so far? The two curricula, the being and the being isness, and then relativity, relativity, I sometimes call it, the science of relations, relativity. Anybody have any questions about what has been spoken of so far, and the motive for this, and what it will take from us, and anything? Well, this would be the time to either write a question mark or, a question mark, and then you would write something, or you would say, I want to speak. So that's, different ways of going. Okay, well, I'll keep my eye open for you, okay? Now, what we have next is, like too many things open. Okay, this is A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, 1,283 pages. And it was copywritten in 1951 by the Lucis Trust, and it was renewed. I don't know how often you can renew copyrights. Is it 2 times? At a certain point, they become public domain. Add another 28 years there. 28, an interesting figure related to Capricorn, and, to a cycle of maturity, and to Saturn, of course. But now, we'd have to add another 20, and in 2007, it would have had to been renewed. I don't know. but there's not so many people that are studying the book anyway. I don't think it's going to be subject to abuse. Now, this is very beautiful, dedicated with gratitude to Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. You know, great admiration, and of course there's a huge link there because DK worked first with, you know, it was Moria and KH behind it, but DK worked immediately, giving to Blavatsky a lot of material that she used in her writings. So he was right in there with the writing of The Secret Doctrine, with Master KH translating the slokas and into English, I guess. And, you know, DK later, he translated The Light of the Soul, the slokas or the sutras that Patanjali had written in another way. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, that great disciple who lighted her torch in the East and brought the light to Europe and America in 1875. Now, I have to comment that that was the year of the founding of the Theosophical Society, and 1875, maybe in a way even more importantly, was the year, we're told, in which Master DK became Master DK. So that was the year of his mastership. And when Blavatsky knew him in Tibet, you know, he was probably an initiate of the fourth degree, a renunciant, and very brilliant and so forth, but not yet Master DK. He's one of the newest of the masters. Oh, it's, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I have over here something that is, yeah, it's not as pretty, but maybe it allows me to write something down. I'll fill in these blue things. I've done written commentary on about 1,190 pages in this book. And now the written commentary is detailed, and I'm going to send that to you. I already have kind of sent it out, but that was earlier in the day, and I've completely forgotten what I've done. But anyway, I sent out a lot of commentary for the very first section of this. And I call it, you know, like S1, 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 S2, and so forth, on to 14. We've got plenty to keep us busy. So let's pay attention here to this ancient prayer from the Savet Upanishads. I always love the Upanishads because they are what I want to call the philosophical approach to the Vedas. One has to respect the four great Vedas, and one has to respect the philosophical Upanishads that went with them and gave us this incredible sense of the one being. Now, India is just the place for that because it's got a Ray 1 soul. Who knows what its monadic ray is? Maybe Ray 2, I don't know. Maybe. Ray 1 soul and a Ray 4 personality at this time. And not only does it have a Ray 1 soul, but its soul sign is Aries. Now put the very first sign of the zodiac, in which being is the theme, along with the first ray soul, and you have this tremendous sense of something far more deeply interfused, and which infuception can detect. To the God who is in the fire and who is in the waters, to the God who has suffused himself throughout all the world, to the God who is in summer plants and the lords of the forest, to that God be adoration, adoration. The Shavet Upanishad 2:17. Well, you know, you get the idea that this is not any kind of primitive lunar Jehovah-like God. This is the poor God suffered a great diminution when it got in the hands of the Middle Eastern religions, as much as they have to offer in other ways. There was a great reduction from the absolutely impersonal God, who is not only in fire and who is in water. See, fire is spirit and water is matter. Okay, that's one way to think about it. Fire is spirit, water is matter. And suffusion is pervasion, is omnipresence of this God. And the devas are invoked here as well, because the God who is in the summer plants and the lords of the forest, we're talking about the Deva kingdom and how the God will manifest through the Deva kingdom. And to that God, of course, look, is devotion really out of style? I've got so much race 6 that I certainly can't claim it is. But there's 21,000 years of a big 6th-ray cycle left in some 40,000 years, a bit more, maybe 44,000 years of a 4th-ray cycle. We're in a long, long 6th-ray cycle. It's probably solar in nature, that is part of a still longer 4th-ray cycle. So about these higher cycles, there's not so much we know yet. We know a few things. The 6th ray is not gone. And if you think about it and you compare our human race takes the baptism on the 6th ray. The birth of the Christ in the heart and the transfer from the sacral to the throat is done via Uranus, the sacral center, and the 7th ray. And then we move up in order. The 6th ray is the big thing for people like us who aspire to the 2nd initiation. I have this thing about initiations. If you want to be truthful, always subtract 1 from your estimate. And if you want to be really truthful, maybe you'll subtract 2, Like you said, the typical disciple is always more conceited than the initiate, consciously conceited, and believes that he or she has accomplished a whole lot more than really has been accomplished. But then, the wish becomes the father, mother to the thought, and then we wish it, so it is true. So, 6th ray, perfectly allowed. Master DK, he had loads of 6th ray. As a matter of fact, his 6th ray was the butt of some jokes that Moria and Kutumi made among themselves, because it appears that Master DK was so super zealous that he ran right into a door and broke his nose. This is one of those little, anecdotal things. Talk about, knowing where you're going. But, this was when he was younger, in spirit, I suppose. But he had huge zeal. Now, to take the 2nd initiation, which is really the beginning of entering the stream, you need that zeal. You need that fire. So there's no excuses to put it aside. It's really important, just as long as you don't spend your time impressing your zeal upon everybody else who gets a little tired of hearing it, So to that God, if we can understand what that God is, be adoration. It's beautiful, I think, and, very ancient, very ancient. Things are a lot older than we think. And humanity is going to have an amazing revelation when the true age of things is discovered. Those big Buddhas that they blew up, the people who want to force the new religion on everybody, okay, but they were replicas of the stature of the man as he existed in the various eras, so a huge, historical revelation was blown up on the basis of small-mindedness and Martian force. Well, we can deplore it. We can deplore all the destruction, but I just want to point to a place which will help us perhaps not deplore as much destruction as otherwise we might. So if we turn to page, in Dyna 2, to page, sorry for occasional blasts of the sound, 285, and what you're going to see here is the seed of all philosophies, 284 and 285, and it's older than the stanzas of Dzyan. And at the end of it all, telling you what God is and time is and unity and space and, being cries forth and says, okay, DK couldn't translate it and have it be meaningful to us. Death crumbles all. Existence disappears. Yet all for A remains, untouched, immutably the same. God is. What an affirmation. And notice that we're living out here in the world of Maya. This is the Mahamaya, and then we have the super universal Mahamaya. We have, when there's no universe, it's not like everything stops, And if the universe goes into pralaya, there is another world. It's super universal. And in that world, which finally resolves into absoluteness, everything is the same. And nothing has been destroyed, and nothing has been changed. Existence disappears, yet all for A remains untouched. Of course, there's nothing else to touch it. Immutably, without possible change, the same, the utter intensity of Venus. You can't put words on it, and you're warned not to, and they used to put you to death if you tried, and I think I've lost my head a lot of times that way. God is. So that last thing tells us about the immutability of the Absolute, which is one of the great themes of Blavatsky in the beginning of The Secret Doctrine. Okay. Now, going on just a little bit. Here's the introduction. So, up to this point, are there any questions or comments you would like to make? I don't fancy us going farther than the introduction, and following that introduction, let me see if I can find that, there are some statements that are very important. However, following that, and all of these things about the, starting from page 3, which, that's the substantive material, a lot of introduction before that. I think the stanzas of Dzyan come in here. And wisely, I think, I was wise about it. I didn't jump in and just start to interpret it. Maybe the first stanza, but it really gets intense. And I waited till the end of the book to interpret as little as I can the stanzas of Dzyan, and, only certain ones that he put in here. Notice, you see? So all of these are done possibly in a video, or 30 videos, actually. And we're not going to worry about them because basically, not yet anyway, basically a 12, 13, my goodness, look. And now he gets into the book on page 35. That's where we go. But what DK said is the whole book is an attempt to put into modern Western language so much of what the stanzas of Dzyan are offering to be understood. So rather than get into all the excuse me, interpretive intricacy of these stanzas of Dzyan, we'll read through his interpretation of them, and then we'll be in a much better position to understand that to which these archaic stanzas refer. And then at the end, of course, he gives other archaic stanzas. There must be a whole collection of these archaic stanzas, and we have to be very grateful to him that he's ventured into our modern Western mind and offered us something we can understand. So we'll jump over the stanzas of Dzyan. They are written out, and I can send you the videos. The videos are, if you really, you have to get into it, they are on Makara, and my pages of notes, it's not very dignified, but my notes are on there too, and the different things that occurred to me as I was reading. In other words, the discussion sheets for all the stanzas and the archaic formulas are there on Makara too. But I would suggest, that since this is not an easy book, that we kind of go together with the more westernized language until we get the hang of what's going on here. And then the stanzas will be interpreted by us, I think, with greater accuracy. So this is another way of telling me I've got to stay alive until 2025. It rhymes, doesn't it? And you too. You too. All right. Now, going back. Anybody have anything you want to say thus far? Thus far. This is a real trip, this book, and we're going to get a little bit into the introduction here. Okay? Right. And if we don't emerge from this book and from the identify as being with some kind of improvement of the abstract mind, then, I haven't done my job, and then we'd have to say that Master GK has not done his. He's done his job, and we just have to take it seriously enough to ascend the bridge of light into a very impersonal world, the impersonal world of the spiritual triad. So here we go. And this is pretty mundane, So let's see what it suggests to us. The story of the many years of telepathic work by the Tibetan with Alice A. Bailey is revealed in her unfinished autobiography, published, that's after her death, really. Death in 1949, in Sagittarius, by the way, published in 1951. So many of these books, you had to wait for their real publication. Maybe some of the inner students, they got it sooner because the Tibetan didn't say, hey, hold off now, I'm writing a book, just wait for me. So he kept on handing out sections of the books, and then the publishers, they had to put together all this material. They did a fantastic job. If you run into a little typo here and there, just think what they had to do in the days before computers. So, and there's a picture, one of our friends and involved in the Moria Federation and other things Rose Bates met Alice's grandson, and he just died. Actually, it's kind of interesting how that all worked out. But anyway, I recall there was a picture of her, Alice, at a table, and she was kind of looking up. Did she have a pen in her hand? I don't know. Was it a typewriter? I can't remember. But there was some kind of glow about it. And what the man said, his name was Gordon, that she was in communion with her master at that point. She was communicating with him. You know, it was a very interesting interior-looking photograph. So, you know, one day maybe we'll know all those details, but they're not the important thing. The personal things are not so important. We all have them, but the impersonal life is what we're looking for. So, the autobiography published in 1951. This includes the circumstances of her first contact with him on the physical plane, which took place in California in November of 1919. And as I recall, it was in Scorpio. And as a matter of fact, I'm wondering if it was November 19th. Some of us did some horoscopes back in earlier days. Again, you know, I'd have to ask Nicholas if he remembers that, if he's what day that was, that he appeared to her as kind of a ringing in her ear, you know, and she rejected him and said, I'm no darn psychic. And he very reasonably said, well, just, there's some help you can give, and just test me out, okay? Just stay with me for a little while here, and I'm going to share with you some thoughts, and then you can make your decision. But it was in Scorpio of 1919. And note that the First World War was over, and there was not necessarily the necessity that there be a Second World War. But the whole thing was badly handled, and the disciples of the world didn't do all they could do, and it precipitated. Okay. So that was a long time ago, 100 years ago. We're just short, what are we, 99 and a couple, 2 more months? It's now almost November 2019. So it seems like a good time for students such as we are of Alice Bailey and the Tibetan to do the best we can with synthesis, such as we can produce it and or recognize it. 30 years' work were planned. Sometimes say, too bad Alice died, after 30 years. But 30 years' work were planned. And, well, when you look at a master and they use an instrument, they are instruments. The old thought is, remember, Blavatsky, she was such a first-rate type. They even refer to her as he, maybe Master Blavatsky these days. But she rushed off to the Garibaldi Wars, so the story goes, what do they say, a cult rumor has it, and was shot dead 2 times. But, had to be revived. I don't know how they do it, but that's the story. She was killed in those wars, but she was an instrument, and they had to pull her back. And Alice Bailey was kept alive by various means during the last years of her life, because 30 years' work were planned. She had, blood disease, and maybe I think leukemia is the story how it goes. And, she was ill with the Leo Aquarius type of diseases. When this had been accomplished, and within 30 days of that period, it's kind of interesting. Someone knows maybe the date of death of Alice Bailey. It's in December. It's in Sagittarius of 1919, and I can't remember the day. But, okay, within 30 days of that period, Mrs. Bailey gained her release from the limitations of the physical vehicle. Now, that's constantly stated, but we don't want to run away from our duty, do we? So we live. I was in a sound studio with Mary Bailey, and we were talking about reincarnation and death and all that. And I asked her, well, don't you want to stay here in incarnation and do all you can, for the cause, whatever I said at that time. It was a long time ago. And she said, you mean to give up that for this? And of course, right in her words were the estimation of how freedom producing, dropping the physical vehicle would be. Now, she was, again, a first-ray soul, probably with a second-ray monad, and Alice Bailey, a second-ray soul, probably with a second-ray monad, and Foster Bailey, a first-ray soul, probably with a second-ray monad. All of them, I think, had the second-ray monad, but they manifested in different ways. So, they have their own private thoughts, and she was, in a way, a wonderful lady, really. She had that quiet strength that comes when you have the first-ray soul and the second-ray personality. And you're also maybe in touch with your monad. Okay. And maybe her astral body was on the second ray. That she says, I remember saying it, she says, my rays were the same as Foster's. She just loved the man, And, well, we have Foster Bailey's rays, first ray soul, second ray personality, fourth ray mind, second ray astral body, and seventh ray physical, with presumably the second ray monad, because you don't stay with Master DK very much. You may dip in, but you don't hang out unless you have either a second ray soul or a second ray monad. Those end up being the students that he teaches over a long time. And there's some stories of people that didn't have that combination and they just didn't last in the group. All right, well, I'm not going to, write here in the blue, but later I may do that, The autobiography, I hope you've all read it, because it's really, it just gives you such a insight into how she lived, what she thought, what she had to live through, Maybe so many of us don't know that during the Second World War, the work almost shut down. They just didn't have the money, and they just felt it might have to come to an end. I mean, I'm sure the people that worked there weren't taking anything, but just to pay the rent and all that. But I don't know how they got through that, but they got through it. And Alice Bailey had a way, when they were short on money, of always going out and buying a new hat. That got the energy flowing, she felt. Such a Leo thing to do, Anyway, they persisted. The autobiography also contains certain statements by the Tibetan in regard to his work and some information as to the reasons why it was undertaken. Well, he tells a lot about the new schools, why they have to appear, that man is too weak in his body, too unstable in his emotions, and too concrete in his mind. Just imagine, the average human being, concrete-minded, unstable emotionally, and weak physically. So the new schools are supposed to help that. And, of course, what the Tibetan has done is to create the impetus towards those 14 new schools that will appear, and later every country of any kind of development will have its own esoteric school. You can't take a brand new country, that is still working on certain of its personality issues and make an esoteric school. It's a question of your causal body, isn't it? The country has to have a certain developed causal body before it can really have a new school. But in the Aquarian age, these schools will appear. So what reason was it undertaken? Well, certainly to correct something that was very much amiss. In the early stages, the work involved careful attention to the physical plane conditions which might best help to make the telepathic process more successful. It's, such a physical etheric thing, and the masters, do whisper in the ears of those who have to be used in certain ways what to do. And how, that was the case with Leadbeater. He was given certain advice that helped to open up his ajna centers so he could do some of that work. That was a kind of training. Krishnamurti went through agony for some years, being trained to be a vehicle for the Christ. Who knows what was said or done? And looks like something here was done with Alice Bailey. But during the latter years, the technique was so perfected and the etheric mechanism of AAB so skillfully attuned and adjusted that the whole process was practically effortless, and the reality and practical usefulness of telepathic interplay was demonstrated to a unique degree. I heard a story, and maybe it was from Alice Bailey, and I can't remember where I got it, but the idea that the Tibetans started working with her one fine day and said, well, we have to discontinue. You've got too much concrete manas right now. I can't get through. I can't say what I want to say. In other words, the concrete nature of the mind can stop the impartation of these higher thoughts from the abstract mind and, from the higher mind, abstract mind, Buddhic principle. So, the overly concrete mind is one of the reasons that people will have to go to Mars for further training at the Judgment Day. They're going to go there because their mind is not developed enough, or because it's overdeveloped in the concrete sense. And that'll be the Judgment Day, separating the sheep from the goats. The sheep is in Aries, and Mars is the ruler, and that's where they go eventually, after going to some other inner place. So I don't know if people like ourselves will be around in that way when that Judgment Day occurs. I mean, the idea or the ideal would be to achieve some degree of mastership right here in this round, on this chain, in this globe, and not have to wait until the fifth round of the Judgment Day. But there'll be initiates even of the sixth and seventh degree on the earth at that time, and that's a good time for the earth to really be moving towards sacredness, and at the same time take a kind of second initiation, which is described in Cosmic Fire. We'll get there on page 384. There's 7 of them, and right now we're going through a fourth on this fourth globe of the fourth chain. It's a real suffering time, okay? He says the role of humanity is, as the cells in the planetary logos, is to suffer. That's good, because it does somehow make one more sensitive. A little bit more here. The spiritual truths dealt with involved, in many cases, the expression by the lower concrete mind, oft with the insuperable restrictions of the English language, I mean, Sanskrit doesn't have those restrictions. So expression by the lower concrete mind of abstract ideas and hitherto quite unknown concepts of spiritual realities. I mean, this was real pioneering work, and people say, hey, she died in 1949, and now here's the latest. It's just crazy because, the rules for work in the Aquarian Age have been given, and hundreds of years of study have been packed into this second installment. So, let's not run out to the latest channeling and think we've got anything real. This unescapable limitation of truth has been frequently called to the attention of the readers of the books so produced. but all too often is forgotten. All too often forgotten. In other words, she had, a language barrier. She called English, as French is not, she called English that inelastic tongue. The British mind has got a lot of fifth ray, and I think the French mind has much more fourth ray, So the concreteness of the British mind and the English language, consequently, was a barrier. So we've got to remember that. And he says, its constant remembrance will constitute in the years to come one of the chief factors in preventing the crystallization of the teaching from producing yet one more dogmatic sectarian cult. When things are cut and dried and set in stone and all that, you don't change them, it's dogma. But if we're not quite sure whether the expression completely captured the idea, we are a little more tolerant and a little less inclined to solidify what is given into some kind of unchangeable dogma. DK is always saying, look, The Secret Doctrine is a wonderful book, but people have made it into a Bible. And, it's true of many theosophists. They were very devoted, he says, the devotee type, but they really exalted in the concrete mind. And they made so much of Blavatsky's teaching extremely concrete. And right there, we forget that we only maybe know the ABCs of anything. Okay, the present volume, A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, first published in 1925. And by the way, the year of the great conclave in the 20th century, really interesting. And 50 years after Master DK was made a master, those fives are important because the second ray has a cycle based on the number 5. 5, 50, 500, 5,000. It's all second ray, which is very interesting. So that was, I think Master DK began to gather his ashram at that time. So anyway, first published in 1925 was the third book jointly produced, because, Letters on Occult Meditation and Initiation, Human and Solar. And if you ever think Initiation, Human and Solar, well, it's just got information that you need at the very end, and it gives it to you in the beginning. And do you think that Letters on Occult Meditation is an easy book? It is not an easy book. So anyway, 3 books are published here, and it will stand as the major and most far-reaching portion of the 30 years' teaching, notwithstanding the profundity and usefulness of the volumes published in series entitled A Treatise on the 7 Rays, or of any of the other books. Now, the rays, okay? The Treatise on the 7 Rays, all 5 of those books, Psych 1, Psych 2, Esoteric Astrology, Esoteric Healing, the Rays and the Initiations, are all written predominantly on the second ray. So they speak to the soul very much. This Cosmic Fire, as I said before, is written on the third ray and the first ray. And, there's some wonderful material on the soul, of course, but we begin to touch something of the monad here in this book, which is seminal, as I said. Okay. Now I know, I have a tendency to go on and on. This is beautiful what is said here. Do you have any questions or any thoughts up to now about what has been disclosed in this reading of the introduction by Foster Bailey? I think it's very important how he saw things. He knew Alice Bailey very well, and he was a trusted author. And he certainly was one of those people who stayed in touch with Master DK. He said, many of you, a lot of you can't reach me, okay? There's too much in the way, so I can reach you through Alice Bailey. Some of you can reach me and you don't know it. You reach me. but somehow it hasn't dawned on you that it has happened. And others of you can consciously reach me. You know the method. So I think that we had Foster Bailey being one of those who could consciously reach the Tibetan. And sometimes when he was writing after the death of Alice Bailey, you know, the one book I remember is kind of I think it's called Running God's Plan. Very first-rate kind of title, you know. Running God's Plan, and there's something emerging esoteric values, several books in there. And he said, the Master has assured me that there will not be an atomic war. Well, okay, that means he's in touch with the Master. And it'd be a nice thing if that really was an assurance, because I'll tell you, when the Tibetan was writing the first introduction to Problems of Humanity, he was not so sanguine. He basically said, look, humanity could have to be started all over again, and if the whole world nations live in an armed camp, and we see the tendencies now even, there will be an explosion. Now, what does he mean by that? Well, everybody shoots off their rockets, and humanity is doomed and have to start all over again to see whether the kind of humanity envisioned by the planetary logos might not be able to be developed. So those are, you know, and the whole idea of a religious war and all that, it's all in his statements there, in the introduction to the Problems of Humanity. So we're not out of the woods yet, but it's interesting that what Foster Bailey said, and, you know, when you look at such a man on the first ray, you know, who's been a lawyer and a fighter pilot and, you know, very steadfast somehow, you tend to believe him. You know, people say, well, he's a water sign. How can he be steadfast? But one of my scientific friends said, well, have you ever tried to compress water? It's pretty dense, and it's not easily compressible. So there's a certain resistance in the Pisces person, which he was, Pisces, with Gemini rising. And, you know, a lot of these people, it's so interesting, they had the moon in Taurus. A bunch of the higher disciples there had the moon in Taurus. It could turn into steadfastness, a well-conditioned etheric body, or, you know, just stubborn resistance. And one would hope that that was not the case. For some of them, it was the case. He got into people's personal problems. He said, I said I wouldn't do this, but in your case, I have to. You eat too much. Okay? It says, you have a physical body. Sometimes you treat it too well, moon in Taurus. Sometimes you treat it badly. All that first ray and seventh ray that this person had. So I'm just amazed at how many people had the moon in Taurus. And, of course, it's in its exalted position there and can be, you know, it's definitely associated with Vulcan and the light of matter that Vulcan can bring and the spiritual will that Vulcan can bring to overcome all of those bad personality habits. Anything you want to ask or comment on at this point? Let's see, Lorraine, maybe you've been doing that. December 15th, that's when she died. Right, okay. Thank you. I thought it was the 14th, but okay, well, within 30 days, so she has to have met the Tibetan either by December 11th or by December 19th. And I had heard that it really was December, not December, but November 19th. Either November 11th, you know, Armistice Day or whatever, or November 19th, adding 4 on either side. Okay, thank you. That's a helpful helpful piece of knowledge. Now, you kind of, are we going to look for Alice Bailey to be a Sagittarian? She's obviously an initiate. She's obviously taken the third degree, just the way Roberto Assagioli can pretty well be assumed to have taken the third degree. I don't know about anybody else. I don't know about Foster Bailey, but pretty close, I would say. But Assagioli and Bailey, I think they both definitely took the third degree. So, and her life was a life of renunciation. I don't know if it could be considered that somehow she passed through the Arhat initiation as a renunciant. I mean, she had to give up everything, really. But that's up to her and up to the Tibetan to determine, and her own master, Master KH. Okay. Thanks, Lorraine. Always good to have the facts. I think I'll read one more paragraph, maybe, here. Look, what we're going to look for here is synthesis. We're at that period in our studies and right before the new revelation when synthesis is so important. So this is where, this is where it ends, not too far ahead, but never make it. If you try to cram too much in, it all falls on the floor. So we'll, just maybe read what we can absorb. During the long course of the work, is this where I am? Yes. During the long course of the work, the minds of the Tibetan and AAB became so closely attuned. Now, there's that story, that in China they were, was there a disciple of someone called Chuang Tzu? Well, DK said, look, I was your guiding disciple when you were a Chela in the light. And apparently these two individualities worked closely together in China in an ancient time. I can't think of the name of the guiding disciple in this case. But the name, I think, of Chuang Tzu comes out in connection with Alice Bailey. But, it's just one of those things that's said, and like Foster Bailey used to say, as Mary Bailey used to say of him saying, interesting, if true. So, okay, if true. There's a lot of occult gossip and a lot of stories that pass around, and, we take note. But we have to see whether it's real, okay? So their minds became so closely attuned, and because this was the practice that they had already in the Chela in the light phase, that they were in effect, so far as much of the production of the teaching was concerned, much of it, maybe not astrology, Alice Bailey was not thinking that way, a single joint projecting mechanism. The Tibetan had his faithful instrument. Blavatsky, he was different. She was very, very independent, and he would give her certain things, and then she would write her own. And what Alice Bailey said, look, if I didn't take it down just the way he told it, he would get rid of me right away, dismiss me. So a single joint projecting mechanism, even to the end, I find this wonderful, even to the end, Alice AAB often spoke of her amazement at the glimpses she obtained through contact with the Tibetan's mind of limitless vistas of spiritual truths which she could not possibly have otherwise contacted, and often of a quality she could not possibly express. Now that sounds very appealing, doesn't it? Especially the second-rate types. I'm going I'm going to go over here to the book, Esoteric Psychology, Volume 1, and I'm going to search out page 203 or so. We'll see how it goes. Oh, there it is, right in front of my nose. Occasionally that happens, you know. What luck. Of the second ray. The student on this ray is ever unsatisfied with his highest attainments. No matter how great his knowledge, his mind is still fixed on the unknown, the beyond, and on the heights as yet unscaled. So I think that pretty well, says it in relation to what we just read about what Alice Bailey perceived through the mind of Master Decay, through the presence of that mind. And I'm just going to, just for fun, throw that in there, but in a smaller font, so we know, well, this is not part of the present text, and I'll just make it different color. Sometimes I try to do these things so I don't get lost, and maybe you have that experience too. Okay. So anyway, imagine, you're working with this master, and all of a sudden limitless vistas of spiritual truths come into your consciousness. And you just know you're standing on the shoulders of a giant. The Newton idea there. If I've been able to achieve more than other men, it's because I've stood on the shoulders of giants. This experience was the basis of her often proclaimed but frequently little understood assertion. Think of this now, that the teachings she was aiding in producing was in fact only the ABC of esoteric knowledge, and that in the future she would gladly abandon any pronouncement in the present teaching when she found better and more deeply esoteric teaching available. Wow, so that's humility, adjusted sense of right proportion, humility, and adjusted sense of right proportion. Clear and profound as the esoteric teaching actually is in the books published in her name, the truths imparted are so partial and subject to later revelation and expansion that this fact, if constantly remembered, will give us a second much-needed safeguard against that quality of the concrete mind, which constantly tends to produce sectarianism. Well, if you look at Christianity, there's over 400 sects in Christianity, and they all believe they have the last word. I mean, there you have the makings of idée fixe. You have the fifth ray mind, very concrete, and you have the sixth ray soul, sixth ray astral body, the desire to see something that you can hang on to forever, something true forever. Well, there is something true forever, but it's not on the level usually expressed by people who have that particular need. I mean, now, of late, the last 30, 40, 50 years, you've heard of statements in the United States coming from Christian fundamentalists, and of course the fundamentalists of all persuasions tend to be the same. You've heard about the, quote, inerrancy of the Bible. Inerrancy, word for word. The strict word of God, word for word. Now, Alice Bailey, who was involved in some translation, basically said, look, that's not possible. I have seen what it takes to translate from the Aramaic or Hebrew, the Greek, whatever, and there is not a literal word for word breath of God in every single syllable and word. But people who want that utter certainty, which will spare them a lot of work, of course, over the many lifetimes, which they don't think they have anyway, they want to settle on something being impossible of error, inerrancy. The Bible, our Bible, is impossible of error. And here we have the Foster commenting on this and saying Alice Bailey knew that there was just ever so much more that could be said, and that she was just saying the ABCs, and that any particular formulation that she wrote down in the English language could be superseded by something much better. There was a humility because of a larger point of view. If you're going to have a humility, says Master Moria, you're going to wear it away with cosmic perception. That's how to get rid of irritation and, this attitude of pride and knowing and all the rest. It's against nature. It's against truth. It's an irritant and imperil that white substance, whatever it is. It's a precipitation of irritation. Think of that. A precipitation of irritation, and it precipitates itself on the nerve channels and causes a general lack of integration. Let's just put it like that. Instead of harmony, the person just gives off friction constantly. We have some Martian politicians that are that way. Okay. Well, okay. I don't want to overdo it here. I don't want to overdo it. Are there any... we'll finish the introduction next week. And, I'll try. It's late here. It's, after midnight, about 12:30 and all that. But, we broadcasters, we're always looking for a time to broadcast, and the Moria Federation is having more and more broadcasts all the time. So we just have to find a time when we can be awake and when other people may be available to listen. So mostly it's going to be night, and it's on a weekday. I know that, and people work for a living, But you can pick it up later if you miss it or whatever. It'll be okay for America, kind of. At least people will be awake. It'll be okay for South America. It'll be a little late for Europe, but they can stand it. When it comes to Vietnam and China and India and all that, well, it's kind of the middle of the night. But maybe if we go as far as Vietnam, it's not exactly in the middle of the night. And in Australia and New Zealand, it's okay. So, the very late hour here in Europe is okay, usually, for a majority of people to pick things up. Be able to attend. Now, the book is really worth reading. It's the great synthesis, and it's the pièce de résistance. Sometimes you think about a masterpiece. Well, maybe the Theosophical Society and the Secret Doctrine were, well, whose masterpiece were they anyway? I mean, Blavatsky was getting close to mastership, and DK did something to promote all that made of it a masterpiece, and then out comes Cosmic Fire 50 years later. The number 5, the initiation number 5, the masterpiece. This is maybe, of all the books he's written, his masterpiece. Then we have to have respect for it and patience and humility and understand, well, this is meant for initiates, and okay, that's just the way it is. And we're going to do our best with it wherever we stand on the path of initiation or probationary initiation or whatever. We'll just do our best. It's better than making no effort at all, especially in the last and assimilative days of the era of the Forerunner. Okay. So let's see if I can... Yeah, that'll be it. So this is the... I'm not going to go any further right now, but I will open the floor. You know, it gives you an idea of a sinkhole, but I don't mean that. All right. This is the end of A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, number 1. And
can we add in-depth something there so we can distinguish it from your other TCF work?
Do I have any? Gosh.
Yeah, you just got a little bit already posted, so it'd be nice if we had a different title for this on Makara.
Isn't it nice when the Word of God comes in and He keeps me on the straight and narrow path? And
yes, and isn't it good to know that God is a woman?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, you know. But occasionally Michael speaks up, so you know maybe it's Father, Mother God, you know. Anyway, God is certainly half a woman. Anyway, what do we have? The divine hermaphrodite helping us keep the blundering speaker straight. Okay, in depth, number 1, and today is 18 of September. Now the next thing, and what page are we on? Something just happened. Suddenly I got a whole bunch of stuff. I can cross that. Oops.
I think it's VII. 7 in small Roman numeral.
Wait a second. A Treatise of Cosmic Fire in Depth, number 1, 18. So, what day are we resuming this?
That's up to you.
Let's give it a week. And it's the 25th. I hope I'm not stepping on a full moon or a solstice or something. Beginning a treatise on cosmic fire, in depth. What a presumption. Number 2, on the 25th of September. Well, the solstice will be past, the equinox rather, and we'll be into the sign Libra, you know. Okay, now, I don't know what page we're on, but this is introduction something, right?
Yeah, it's small Roman numeral 7.
That's what
VII.
Now I understand. And we ended on 7, too. Very good. Intro, page 7, and onward. Now I understand. All right, good. Thank you, Joe. Okay, friends, we've covered a little. What are your thoughts, your questions? You know, are you ready to think synthetically as anybody? What does it mean to do so? Are our studies, broad enough so that we can begin to think synthetically about these things and gain a larger picture of all the details, and yet somehow the coherence of the whole thing, the synthesis of it all? You know, what does it say? That synthesis is and unity has to be created. Somewhere it's pretty much close to that. So we want to approach the synthesis that is, but of course we have to deal first with the unity of things. And so if you have any other questions or comments or thoughts, then, you know, I'm certainly willing to attempt to respond to them. Yeah. if you do. And I hope you feel, excited about this possibility. I do. Like I say, I've taught this course before, which is like it's like nothing. I mean, we went deeply, and people were attentive and all that, but the nature of this book. And you see, this kind of thing is what I'm going to send you. And I already have sent it out. I think I sent it to Joe and to those. And here is the text, and here is the commentary on the text, which we're not going to, you can read it. We're not going to go through everything by any means. But, I've tried to put in as much detailed thought or clear thought as I'm capable of. Of course, that was 10 years ago, and, or so, and maybe I've learned something since, but okay, I'm sending you all of these. Now, the first, or via Joe, I'll send them to you. And this is called, what's it called? It should be something like S1, there'll be S1, S2, something like that. So I've got 14 divisions in this first section of study. And if you want to, you can read it, and maybe it will help. There's not ever going to be time to read all my commentary, nor is it necessarily the best way to proceed. There will be time, however, and we'll make time wherever we end up to read everything Master DK said. My commentary is just what I think, okay? At least what I thought. And before long, I may know whether it's right or wrong. But anyway, it gets us thinking. That's the point. And Francis, of course, is helping tremendously. Well, I'm very happy about all the Moria Federation people who are doing the presentations, and the staff is terrific and keeping us going. But we've got a lot of presentation, and as you know, with Francis, he's doing webinars every 2 weeks now, and every month he does the Secret Doctrine, and that's going to take a long time. So I hope you can attend that, and then another 2 weeks pass, and every month on that schedule, he does Manly Hall's The Secret Teaching of All the Ages, which go through the book with maybe the longest title in the world, I don't know, an encyclopedia of Masonic, Kabbalistic, Rosicrucian, symbolic, maybe, philosophy. And that's a wonderful book because Manly Hall draws from so many different traditions. So, but Cosmic Fire, let's not disguise it, is tough going. But once you really cut your teeth on Cosmic Fire, you'll be able to approach the substance of the ageless wisdom with greater confidence. I'm not saying we can ever be entirely confident. I mean, we're just little people here in terms of what we know. I mean, one day we might find ourselves to be the God of the universe, okay, when we get properly unveiled. But what does the planetary logos know? What does the solar logos know? What does the one about whom not maybe said know? And on it goes. Expanding rings past not of knowledge. And we discover that this knowledge seems endless, but it's not. It's still finite. And we're on our way. We've made the turn, and now we try to expand greatly into a comprehensive understanding of life and what's behind ordinary life. And we can do it. Not perfectly, of course, but we can make progress. Okay, then I'm going to close. And if are there any, I think I've answered most everybody. I'm sorry if Yvonne was there. I haven't been able to get you off self-mute, and maybe write to Yvonne, Yvonne Gordon, and see if there's a way that she can understand that self-muting thing. It will help. And I know it seemed she had something to say. I always want to give people who have something to say a chance to say it. Okay, let's close in a way that, of course, is legitimate for our particular work with a great invocation. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Okay, friends, thank you for attending. Time will tell whether this idea is a flight of madness or whether we can really stick with it and that it's really needed. But anyway, I suspect that everybody who sticks with it, including myself, will emerge with a much more comprehensive view of what reality really is and be able to help other people accordingly. So, lots of love to you and many blessings, and we'll see you soon. Yeah. Okay, Roz, I will answer that. I'm sorry, I seem to have missed a little bit. But anyway, Aquarius rules the bloodstream and Leo rules the heart. So when you get diseases of the bloodstream, Aquarius is oftentimes involved. I'll bet it'll be shown when we do our statistical analysis. Not a nice way to end, but that the blood cancer, leukemia, is a lot of that is associated with Aquarius. That's all I meant, really, you see. But back to a more pleasant ending. Tuya and I will be, tomorrow's reappearance of the Christ Day. I think, I think, and I hope and I pray that Tuya can broadcast from the Little Bear Meditation Center. She spent some time with a computer expert here in Finland, and hopefully that problem is solved. And then on Friday we have our nighttime schedule for glamour, and there's plenty of it for everybody now. So we want to do our work, and then Saturday back into the readings and the destiny of the nations, and Sunday the evening schedule for attracting financial resources. And then for hierarchical work, and we'll be heading into, I think on the 22nd, the actual equinox will occur. And Tuya will be leading a meditation, as usual, with music and imagery and so forth. And let's see if I could tell you exactly the time of the equinox, because we want to be thinking about that, let's see if I do this. I don't care, what it is. Let's see if I can go here. Maybe you'll be interested in the equinox somehow. And I'm just going to have to cancel all this stuff. And maybe say this is new. I've got my son there. He probably doesn't appreciate that. But anyway, well, let's just say the equinox will occur. And let's see. Here it is. Return and ingress. That's it. Okay, very good. So let's see what this will mean. Advanced ingress, 2019, the nearest, and it's apply, and it's the sun we're looking at, and it's the ingress into Libra, the symbol for which should be Li, and hopefully hitting the OK button will give us something. And Libra enters that sign. So it'll be at 7:50 and 4 seconds in the morning, GMT. It looks like the 23rd of September here in Europe and the 22nd in the States. So it'll be a different horoscope for every place. Anyway, the 23rd, and by that time, we hope that our broadcasting system will be working for you. Okay, thank you. And, we'll have this converted, and it should be available somewhere, and we'll figure out where, and we'll let you know. Bye for now.